Hi, my name is Juan, and welcome to The Couch, a podcast where real therapists talk about real things. Please remember that we are therapists, but we are not your therapists, and this podcast is intended for educational purposes only. So here's a question that many parents have. When is the right time to introduce social media to our kids? Right, it's a big question. Because when it comes to social media, it's not just one variable, right? It's not just when do we introduce one social media app. It's really when do you introduce this entire world and all of the benefits and all of the risks that can come with it. And it's important to look at it from both perspectives, benefits and risk, right? We look at benefits of social media, and it could be that your child dives in and they're super into perhaps coding, and that leads to them being really intrigued and interested and involved in their academic studies. So now, right now, diving into social media, into tech, into that world is amazing, right? It's really giving your child that nudge to enjoy their interests, their future, and so forth. On the other hand, there's the risk, and I'll share with you at Santos Counseling, working with parents. It's a common conversation that many of our counselors have with parents that bring that to the table. Often a parent will come in and say, I'm a bit worried about my middle schooler. They're spending a lot of time on social media. So what I want to do for this episode is, first I want to share with you, when it comes to social media and mental health, it's still a growing area of research. There's a lot of room for further studies to fill holes and to bridge gaps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention some of the research while also looking at a really important area, and that's how can we show up for our kids? How can we create an effective system so that social media, right, is addressed constructively, effectively, and we're leaning towards the benefits, right, and really away for the risk. So what I want to share with you, and this is one really neat place to start with here, and it's the APA, American Psychological Association. I was looking at some recent research there and surveys, and one of the items that really caught my attention as far as social media is that risk of peer influence, right, connected to your child. Let's say if your child's in that category of being an adolescent, right, the risk of peer influence. Now, specifically, that would be like negative peer influence. So here, this would be where your child maybe gets out of school and they're logging into Roblox, or they're playing Fortnite, or they're on Snapchat, or they're on Facebook, or they're on Instagram or TikTok, right? Any of these social avenues. And one thing that we want to think about as parents is negative peer influence. And important to that, we want to look at a really honest conversation. Can we, as parents, remove every obstacle in the way that would lead our child to being in a space that would have negative peer influence? And really the answer is no, right? That would be extremely difficult to do. So instead, we look at training, right? We look at training, we look at education, we look at how can we give our kids, how can we provide them with a space where they're aware, right? They're aware of, that's a conversation I shouldn't really be getting into. That's a topic I probably want to lean away from. And that comes from guidance, that comes from education. So here's what you want to think about. And this is, again, looking at the brain, looking at research, and specifically the prefrontal cortex. I like to look at that area as executive functioning, right? That area has a lot to do with, can I make the right decisions? Can I think through this situation effectively and constructively? So naturally, that area of the brain is going to develop as we progress through life versus right away when we're out the womb. Now, when we look at kids at puberty, there's this typical increase in desire, increase in craving for attention from others, for almost like a highlighter effect, visibility, for social rewards, really wanting to be involved, wanting to be seen, wanting to be liked, if you will, appreciated. So if you think about that and you go, okay, my child hits that age of puberty, right? And they're likely to lean towards that area of craving visibility, craving attention or positive feedback from others. It could be their peers in their classroom. It could be peers on the sports field. And they've got this area of their brain, right, the prefrontal cortex, that's not yet fully developed. All right. And when I use the word developed, I mean it in the manner of they're still learning, right? I mean, heck, many of us are still learning how to resist peer pressure, or we're still learning how to pick the right crowds, right? We're still learning to be okay with not always being center of attention. So your child in this really sensitive space where that area, the prefrontal cortex, is not yet fully developed, and you throw social media in there, it's not like a 100% that it will happen. But if we don't have the right tools, the right foundation in place, it's likely that they may struggle in there. They may struggle to not crave social attention. So then what can happen, right? What does this look like in plain sight? This could be that your child's spending way too much time, maybe on Roblox, maybe on Fortnite. Maybe this means that as soon as your child gets out of school, they're picking up their phone and they're diving into some social media app. And then you go, why? And the big why could be that craving, right? I'm hungry for attention. I'm hungry for some sort of positive feedback. And little glimpses like that you may see in certain ways. And it could be a picture is thrown up there and you want like 1,000 likes, or you want a bunch of hearts, or you want a big share, right? So that gives you that insight. Now, I've shared a couple of items there with you. And if we go a little bit further, right, we keep adding to this of social media and then what we can do as parents. Let's still talk about some of the risk, right? Some of the challenges that come with it, items that we want to look out for. And one of the most common ones that I hear from parents that I work with is, how much time should my child spend on social media? What I like for you to look at, because it's a good question, but also like for you to look at is, how is social media affecting the functioning of your child? So let me give you an example here. Let's look at sleep, because there's a lot of research that really goes into social media impacting a child's sleep. And what happens is when your child is getting out of school and they're just fully into social media, spending too much time on there, well, their sleep's going to be off, and that's their circadian rhythm. And if their sleep is off, I don't know about you, when I don't get good sleep, my performance is off. As a clinician, showing up for others, it's not where I'd like it to be, because I feel tired, right? But very, very simple, I feel tired. So if your child is spending too much time on social media, that could filter into their sleep, and that could lead to poor performance when it comes to their academics, right? Maybe they're in elementary or middle or high school. And this can also impact, later in college years and so forth. But we're talking about kids, so let's focus on that. That could impact their school performance. And then when you look at sleep, it's not just, the grades aren't great, right? It also impacts their ability to manage and regulate their stress. Because when our sleep is off, it becomes a bit more difficult to manage those big feelings. The other part of sleep is our ability to actually focus on what is taking place. And this one I've noticed a lot from kids that I'll work with, and we kind of get into the weeds of conversations. And I may ask them, if you're up late and maybe you're playing Xbox or PS5 or something like that, or you're on your phone. And when I use social media, I'm really just bringing it all into media. They'll share with me, yeah, I'm really tired the next day. And so then I go, well, what if you're in class? Is it easy to focus on your teacher? And they're like, no, that's the last thing I want to do, which makes sense. So now what you can have is this unregulated time on social media leading to all of these negative challenges. And then at the end of the day, your child is left with it. And I want you to think about that. Imagine you're a kid and you're on social media and you're having a great time. But then that leads to, a lack of balance there. And that lack of balance leads to maybe you're being influenced by a negative crowd. Maybe you're going after this craving of visibility or attention or feedback from others. Maybe your sleep is off. And then now you look at your grades and they're not where you want them to be. On the sports field, you're not performing the way you want to perform. Well, what's next? Right? And what's next is often the three selves: self-esteem, self-worth, self-confidence. They start going down. And I wanted to mention those in the beginning because, again, we can really just broaden this topic of social media. And there'll be a lot of podcast episodes focused on it. But instead, I wanted to pull in some constructive areas. So let's look at now a couple of guidelines that I find really helpful. Number one, and when it comes to helping your child with social media, create rules for the family. Create rules for the family. No one likes to feel like the oddball. So instead of, child has to put their phone up, everyone, have a rule in the house where if you come in the house, all phones go on this table here, put them in the basket, and everyone follows that rule. What that does is it helps to create alignment. It creates unity, and it doesn't make someone feel that they have this problem that they can't control, but somehow you can control it. In addition to that, that same rule incorporates a level of leadership, right? If your child's at home and they notice that you go from the kitchen to the bathroom holding your phone, staring at it, and then you get out of the bathroom and then you walk upstairs holding the phone, staring at it, and then you go get something from your car holding the phone, staring at it, and you talk to them, halfway looking at them, halfway looking at your phone, we got to connect the dots. And I get it, right? We're busy adults. We're needed in a lot of places. But here, the conversation for this episode is how do we help our kids when it comes to social media? And leadership is one of those. So leadership helps because it provides the effective modeling. And that modeling goes a lot into that prefrontal cortex, that executive functioning, which has to do with making decisions, thinking ahead of time, time management, prioritization, emotional regulation, and so forth. The other item here to look at with supporting your child when it comes to social media is have a bedroom rule. So, really, when I look at the bedroom, I like to say that's the bed and that's a place of sleep. That's a place of rest. And when you mix in too much, when you put in, you can also wake up, first thing you do is grab your phone. That can lead to really them staying up too late. And then that becomes a bit problematic. So that's another item that you can do, and you can implement pretty quickly into the house where you're letting your child know, hey, blank time, you're going to bed, and phone goes here, right? Phone does not go in there. More than likely at that age, there's no emergency that's going to take place that they're going to need a phone in their room, or social media in their room, tablet, TV, etc. And kind of think through that. When you really look at it, what major situation can happen that your child will need their social media device in their room during that nighttime? Often parents will say, well, I want an alarm clock. And that's where you could look at maybe in Alexa. And I get that's still in that tech area. But really what you're trying to do is you're trying to limit the amount of apps that can be on it. So that's the next item that I want to go in. And this has to do with developmental stages. This will be the last one, then we'll finish up here on this awesome, hopefully really insightful and helpful episode. When looking at social media, instead of how much time should my child spend on there, shift to how can I provide my child with social media in a manner that develops over time, right? So I like to think about this as sports. If you're teaching your child how to play baseball, you may not right away gear them up and have, old school Pedro Martinez throwing 100-mile-per-hour fastball at them, right? That wouldn't be the best approach. You would do it in baby steps, right? You would first toss the ball to them, show them how to hold the bat, show them how to hold the glove, eye coordination, and so forth. So here, when it comes to social media, early on, right during those maybe elementary school years, you're introducing them to social media. You're opening that line of communication. You're letting them know this is what this app is. This is what it does. Here's some really neat things you could do it. And you're doing it with them, right? And the reason you're doing that is because you're inviting them into this place while monitoring it. And then when you introduce the first device, and I'll give you an example. So there's like there's some watches out there that have very limited apps. And the purpose of those that I find really neat is it limits the amount of exposure your child has to tech. And it focuses the exposure on what do I specifically need, right? So let's say that you have a elementary school age child, and perhaps there's like a situation in the family, and let's give this context, because here's a really common one. There's a divorce, and you're splitting time. So a child gets out of school, and you want more access to your child, so you decide, instead of a phone, you go with a watch. And this watch has just minimal apps, and I mean, all it has is you can call and you can text and maybe a calculator, right? So the purpose of the minimal apps, well, let's go beyond that. The purpose of this device is probably for you to be able to communicate with your child, which makes sense. You want to look at the child's age, right? Early in that elementary school age, they have yet to develop a lot of those executive skills to know how to manage this device, right? That takes time. They're still learning who they are, after all. Having just 3 variables, call, text, and a cool calculator, it gives them this really elementary stage of learning how to maturely use a device, use social media. And then from there, you monitor, you teach, you educate, you lead, and then you go a little bit more, right? You take it to that next level. And that could be during those middle school years that you go to maybe a next step up. But you're following those same rules. What is your child doing that's showing you that they're ready for this step? And that's going to really lead the way there. More than likely, and I'll share this with you as a clinician as well as a father of 2, you're going to see little hiccups throughout the way. And some are going to be caused by you. There's times where I'll give my child a device, and then I'm like, crap, it's been like 4 hours. Right, and I'm over here preaching to the choir, if you will, but not following through. It happens, right? Don't be too hard on yourself. There's times that you may be traveling, right? You're heading off, and you got this 9-hour or 12-hour drive to Disney World, and you're like, I just need that tablet and their headphones so I can get some peace and quiet while I'm making this. That makes sense, right? We're not looking at is it right or wrong. We're more just accepting that life's going to have these curveballs. So what I want you to think about is that big picture. The big picture is you're wanting to introduce social media to your child in a way where they are managing it and maturely, if you will, effectively. There's a balance. They understand how to use it, how not to use it. They know the risks, they know the benefits. And having effective leadership really goes a long way there. I'm sure there's a lot of questions about social media and raising children that were not answered on this episode. And let me know what those questions are. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Leave a comment in the review. Leave a review. Share with any parent that you think will find it helpful. And I'll leave you with one more item here. When you're bringing this topic of social media, it can feel overwhelming. And I'll share with you as a father, there's times that I get very overwhelmed because right when I'm understanding one app, another one comes out. And what I encourage you to do is I encourage you to keep an open line of communication with your child. I find that's one of the most essential things that we can do. That line of communication, it helps to know what's happening in that world, and then they get to know a little bit of yours. Because there's going to be new apps that come out. There's going to be these new features. And, the way tech rolls is that our kids are going to probably know a lot more about it than we do, which can be really scary because we're trying to now, avoid risk, if you will. We're trying to help them and encourage them and teach them when we don't know a lot about it. So that line of communication, I think that's essential. It goes a long way. My friends, I hope that you found this episode helpful. If Santos Counseling can be of support to you when it comes to supporting your child with the balance of social media, supporting you as a parent, please let us know. Reach out. You can visit santoscounseling.com, scroll through the page, find a counselor that fits that criteria you're looking for. There's a form on pretty much every page at the bottom where you can fill out. Let us know what you're looking for. Our admin team will touch base with you, and we will get that ball rolling to get your appointment set up. Have a great rest of the day.